This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, check out squarespace.com. Hey everybody, and welcome back to a new video. Do you wonder if you should get a full frame camera and if it will be worth it? Do you wish you knew all the things, both benefits and challenges, that come from a switch before you make that decision? In this video, I'll walk you through going from a smaller sensor like APS-C or Micro Four Thirds to a full frame camera to make sure you make the right decision. Make sure you stay for my bonus tip, where I answer the question, will a full frame camera give me blurrier backgrounds? And the answer may not be what you expect. My name is Simon D'Entremont, and I'm a professional nature and wildlife photographer living in Eastern Canada. I make weekly videos giving you photo tips or taking you behind the scenes for nature photography. Subscribe if you want to see more. And by the way, I just passed the milestone of 500,000 subscribers here on YouTube. I want to thank you for that because it's viewers like you that make it happen. So let's get into answering the question, should I get a bigger sensor? Is bigger better? The reason people often ask themselves this question is that they see professionals using full frames, and often full frame cameras are more expensive, so they're often perceived as moving up. But are they always better? The first thing we should nail down is what we mean by the various sensor sizes. By sensor sizes here, we're talking about physical dimensions of the sensor, not how many megapixels it has, which is more really pixel density. Full frame cameras have sensors that are 24 by 36 millimeters, close to what film cameras used to have. They have an aspect ratio of 2 by 3. The next smaller size is what's called a crop sensor, also called APS-C, at 16 by 24 millimeters and also 2 by 3. Canon's crop sensors is a wee bit smaller. Then there's Micro Four Thirds at 13 by 17 millimeters and an aspect ratio of 3 by 4. Now that we understand the sensor sizes, let's dive into how these are different. Of course, there are no absolutes in anything, but I'll try to give you some guidance about how different genres are affected by these factors. That's because the answer to the question, should I get a larger sensor, depends on what you photograph and how you photograph it. To say that one type of sensor is better than another in all scenarios is just plain wrong. A first attribute where sensor sizes differ is the field of view, what some people might call reach. That's because smaller sensors capture a smaller field of view than a full frame, and when you view this smaller crop by filling the screen, you get an apparent magnification of the subject in the field of view. On a crop sensor, it's 1.5 or 1.6 times depending on the brand, and for Micro Four Thirds, this crop factor is 2 times. What's the impact of this? So first, if you find that your subjects are often too small in the frame with your current setup, going full frame will make this worse. Your subjects will look even smaller than before as you will have a wider field of view with a larger sensor. If you shoot sports, wildlife, or motorsports where you can't get closer or zoom with your feet as we say, going full frame isn't going to help. Getting a lens with more focal length would be the best option. If you still have other reasons to go full frame, understand that you'll need to get a longer focal length lens to use with your full frame camera to match the subject size you used to have with your crop sensor or Micro Four Thirds cameras. At the other end of the spectrum of having more reach is having a wider field of view. In this case, full frames are an advantage as they capture a wider slice of the scene. This is valuable in genres where you are in close quarters but you need to capture a wide view. Indoor architecture and real estate photography are prime examples and good use cases where full frames make a lot of sense. Here's a view of a room shot with a 17mm lens on both a crop sensor and a full frame. The larger field of view of the full frame is handy here. The next thing to consider are lenses when you go full frame. This is because your current lenses you use for your smaller sensor camera may not fit or work well on a full frame camera. Crop sensor lenses are designed to cover the area of a smaller sensor. When you use these lenses on a full frame camera, the image circle that the lens projects doesn't cover the larger area of the full frame sensor. This leaves you with the edges of the frame that aren't illuminated and come out too dark. This is called vignetting. Many cameras at least have a workaround for this called crop mode. On some cameras, this is automatic when you place a lens designed for crop sensor on a full frame camera. And on some cameras, you may need to change this setting manually in your camera. What crop mode does is that it only uses a smaller part of the sensor, the part that the lens's image circle can illuminate. So it does indeed work, but you lose the benefit of the larger sensor. What does this mean for you? It means that over time you'll need to buy new lenses for your full-frame camera and include the costs in your calculations when budgeting for the cost of switching. Also note that full-frame lenses are often more expensive than lenses made for smaller sensors. The requirement to illuminate a larger sensor makes the lens body and optical elements larger and more expensive. The next area where the sensor sizes differ is low light performance. That is the ability to shoot in low light and have less noise and better image quality in the dark areas of your photo. This is one area that favors the larger full-frame sensor. Its larger surface area, larger pixels, and wider field of view combine to make cleaner images than smaller sensors when light is low. It's not hard to think of different scenarios and genres where low light is something we need to deal with. Dark wedding receptions and churches, nightclubs, music venues and concerts, nighttime cityscapes, and Milky Way photography are all prime examples where a full-frame camera is indeed an advantage. Have a look at these two images as a comparison, shot using the same settings. As you can see, the full frame produces a much more pleasing image. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. I built my own website using Squarespace and it was a breeze. A website is just a great way to have a professional place online where you can show off your work, your service, or your personal brand. Social media are often showing you or your work in short clips, sometimes makes it difficult to monetize, as they may not want links to external sites. A website is a permanent home for you and your work and your brand, presented in galleries or on pages designed by you that show them off at their best. There are lots of useful templates, including ones for specific genres like photography, which is mine. Or you can be more daring and artistic and go outside the templates using the new AI feature called Squarespace Blueprint to help you personally curate your own build. It's also a great way to monetize your work by setting up an online store so you can take payments by credit card or PayPal from all over the world. And now with a new added feature of buy now and pay later with ClearPay and Afterpay. Go to squarespace.com to sign up for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Simon for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The next difference that's often seen between sensor sizes is price. Larger sensors usually cost more money to produce and sometimes need a larger housing to hold it all, driving up the price of the camera. There are a few caveats to this though. One is that the cost increases between smaller and larger sensors isn't only due to the sensor size. Larger sensor models often have other features added to them that add to the price. Weather sealing, better viewfinders, better build quality, and more customizability are other features that are often found on full frames. And some people may buy a full frame as much for these features than the sensor. Now this isn't a straight line factor that's always true in every case. Manufacturers are now making stripped down full frames like an entry-level Canon R8 full frame that are creating new types of cameras where you can separate sensor size from the features so that bigger isn't always more full-featured. A great trend in my opinion, giving people options regardless of the sensor size. The next difference in sensor sizes is the physical size and weight of the camera lens combination. Remember, the lenses are bigger too. If you look at this full-frame Canon R6 camera and a 17-40 f4 lens and compare it with this Canon M50 crop sensor camera with a 15-40 f3.5 to f6.3 lens, you can clearly see the size difference. Size is actually a common reason that people switch back from full-frame to a smaller sensor. I have tons of wildlife photography friends who like shooting crop sensors even if they can afford a full frame. They like having the combination of a small form factor and the crop factor focal length equivalent reach from it. Hiking, long walks, vlogging handheld, airline travel, and discretion for street photography are other reasons where a larger full frame camera may not be an advantage. That being said, these days manufacturers are again forging new ground with innovative models. This Canon R8 and RF 16mm lens is a full-frame camera, but is hardly larger than a small crop sensor camera and is still great in low light and has a wide field of view for vlogging, and I can put it in a jacket pocket, lens and all. By the way, if you're looking to up your photography game, I have a guide on shooting in backlit situations on my website. If you sign up for my email list, you can get it for free. Link below. An area where bigger sensors do indeed have an advantage is in dynamic range and the fidelity of colors, especially when manipulated in processing. So this is about how many variations of tones can your sensor capture and the fidelity of those tones. Through the benefit of larger sensors and larger photo sites, that means that dark shadows can be photographed with better image quality with full frames. And this will be even more apparent when you try to raise the exposure of dark areas in processing. The same thing is true with the bright end of the spectrum. If you overexpose a photo or shoot it with unavoidable bright highlights like an indoor real estate shoot, the full frame camera will be able to recover the bright areas better than a smaller sensor. Like here. This dynamic range benefit is one that can make full frame cameras a good choice in genres that suffer from great variations in light to dark, like automotive photography with those bright reflections, real estate with bright light from windows into dark rooms, landscapes shooting into the sun, and music venues with bright lighting in an otherwise dark room. And by the way, if you recently bought a full frame, please share what genre you shoot and what the benefits and challenges were of the changeover. The viewers and I would love to know. Now on to explaining the poorly understood answer to the question, will a full frame camera give me blurrier backgrounds? Creamy and blurry backgrounds are an often sought after attribute for some genres like portraiture, automotive photography, sports, and wildlife. And this is an often quoted benefit of full frame cameras, but one that the conditions for which are poorly understood. First off, yes, people who use full frame cameras in some genres like portraiture often have nice, creamy backgrounds. But to note, the size of the sensor does not directly alter an image to make the background blurrier. If I take a photo with the same settings using the same lens on a full frame and an APS-C sensor, the image circle coming through the lens is exactly the same. The only difference is that the crop sensor image looks magnified. The depth of field is the same. The reason that the background looks blurrier and depth of field is thinner with full frames is that with a wider field of view, we do one of two things to get the subject the same size in the field of view. We either get closer or use a longer focal length lens. Turns out those are the two things that indeed cause shallower depths of field. So full frame cameras only have a shallower depth of field because of what it makes the photographer do differently, not some physical characteristic it gives an image. And by the way, is a shallower depth of field always better? It isn't. In landscapes, we often want the whole image in focus. The same for macro, where maybe a blurry background is nice, but all of your subject being in focus is nice too. In those genres, getting the whole scene in focus may be easier with a smaller sensor. If you're interested in the subject of how photos shot on different sensor sizes look different, and the topic of whether or not you should adjust the aperture to compensate for different sensor sizes, that's a discussion on equivalency, and I have a whole video on that, which you can see right here. If you thought this video deserving, give it a like and YouTube will show it to even more photographers, helping others make the right decision about their next camera purchase, and I hope you can go out there the very next time you go out with whatever camera you choose and come home with your own unique and amazing photos. I know you can do it.